What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Shield Splitter Podcast. Now, today we'll be continuing our Super Smash Bros. Ultimate discussion, but this time we'll be covering true rivalries. Previously, we had a discussion about one-to-one comparisons. It was a pretty basic observation to prove that Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is not only a legacy project, but looking at the way that characters are being added, it makes it reasonable that you can predict who might show up next. Now, to quickly cover a few, it was the comparison between characters like Super Mario and Sonic, Samus and Simon Belmont, Pac-Man, Mr. Game & Watch, Link, Marth, Ike, Roy from the Fire Emblem series, and Kirby versus Mega Man. Now, I won't be covering that today, but it's still rather important and relevant because I'm going to be speaking about true rivalries, which is also kind of a one-to-one comparison. Not really, because there's more heroes than there are villains, usually on one side than the other, but it's still important to note. Now, I bring this up only because the Metroid series seems to be the exception to the rule, where we have the one hero, Samus, which is both Zero Suit and in her power suit, and then we have Ridley and Dark Samus. Now, in the previous discussion, I briefly touched on what it is that certain characters meant to the series when they were added in previous titles. Just like in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, for example, I made the proclamation that DDD and Meta Knight being added were a representation of the adventure mode, Subspace Emissary, which was based on Kirby's Superstars. So jumping ahead to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, I'm under the impression that the same thing is happening here. More than likely, these new characters are being added to set the tone for what the game is going to be or what the game wants to present to the audience. Now, I can't be exactly sure about what that is just yet because there's not enough information, but we do have some history that we can pull from. Now, when we have these discussions, I always skip over Super Smash Bros., the original game, and I always skip over Melee for very good reasons. It's pretty clear that around those points in time, the game was still discovering what it is that it wanted to be exactly. Now, this isn't to say that Melee or Super Smash Bros., the original game, were bad games or anything like that, but when it came to Brawl, it was pretty obvious that Sakurai and his team had a vision for the game. Super Smash Bros. Melee is a beast of a game in its own way, but not relevant to the discussion that we're having now, so that's why I'm skipping over it. Now, in a much similar way to the one-to-one comparisons, when it came to games representing a certain series or a certain genre, there seems to be an almost identical theme going on with the true rivalries. Alright, so let's look at some true rivals. We have Mario and Bowser, or you can have Wario as more of like a rival to Mario, but Bowser's more so a villain. You have Donkey Kong, and then you have King K. Rool right now, Samus, and then also Zero Suit Samus, and then you have Ridley. Dark Samus is technically a villain, but I would kind of put Dark Samus in that rival category. You have your Link and Ganondorf, Kirby and Meta Knight, and then DDD as a rival. I mean, you can go back and forth. I don't really consider DDD or Meta Knight to be villains, but whatever. Then you have, of course, Pit and Dark Pit, which are some honorable mentions, and Fox and Wolf from the Star Fox series, which I consider Wolf to be more of a rival, and also Dark Pit. But you have true rivalries now, not necessarily always villains, right? So now the question comes, what does that mean for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate? What's the theme behind that? Is there something they're going to do with that? I would say obviously yes, but what is it? What do they plan to do? Now here it leaves the door open to speculate. Now I don't want to do that just yet. I want to wait a little further into the discussion to do all of my speculating. But right now I just want to put all the cards on the table and look at what we have. Now I feel like we're left with this huge yarn ball of contradiction because we have a lot of information about the game now, but we also don't have enough information. So either way that you look at it, we can't be sure about anything. Now with that said, I want to have some fun and really look at some amazing things that I noticed. We're going to do all of that and more when we come right back.
Listen up, please!
Welcome back to the Shield Splitter Podcast. Now, I really want to get into these true rivalries, and there's a few important changes that I've noticed about the game, going from Super Smash Bros. For Wii U to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Now, in my opinion, it can be argued that characters have always had personality in these games. Like, it's nothing new. Most of the characters take attributes from the games they're from. They have comic relief to them. They have certain moves that they do that give them a little bit of a cartoony nature. It's a pretty common thing with this game, and a lot of well-made fighting games. Guilty Gear being another example. Dragon Ball Z Fighters, another great example. A lot of personality goes into characters to make them unique and stand out from one another. Now, with that being said, I just want to point out that even though that's happened in Ultimate, it's a little different. They've taken it to the next level, in my opinion. Now, newer characters like King K. Rool and Dark Samus are some great examples, and I really want to cover Dark Samus first because I feel as though that's one of the better examples in this case. Now, I feel that Dark Samus is a great example to start with because Dark Samus isn't as cartoony as a character like King K. Rool. Now, this isn't to suggest that personality is a lot easier to give to a cartoony character, because there's different levels to personality depending on what you're going for. I guess my real point is that Dark Samus has a lot of her own personality, or its own personality, and I feel as though it's a more serious character. Not necessarily realistic, but is in a series with a more serious tone to it than something like a Donkey Kong Country. Now, I'm not personally a fan of the Metroid series, and I use maybe Samus a little bit here and there in the Smash Brothers games. Not necessarily one of my favorite characters, but definitely a cool character. I can appreciate the character's design, the moveset, especially the stages. The stages from Super Metroid are great additions to the games. Dark Samus, on the other hand, which I've never played before obviously, seems to embrace all of the things that I didn't like about Samus initially, and kind of owns those things, which is really strange. Now, coming from a Brawl perspective, I always felt that Samus was a little too floaty, and her fighting style in Super Smash Bros. Brawl didn't seem to fit her physics, if that makes any sense. It's almost like it was a contradiction where I could never quite get a feel for the character, because the character seemed to be a contradiction within itself, if that makes any sense. Getting a feel for a character is one of the most exciting parts about playing a fighting game, or some kind of competitive game to this degree, like Super Smash Bros. And when you get a feel for the character, it kind of helps point the direction and what it is that the character wants to do. What I'm saying is, just watching Dark Samus's wraith-like movements and the gracefulness and gliding in which the character moves, I feel as though I grasp the concept of how it is that character is supposed to be played. Which of course is odd, because not only is the character an echo fighter of Samus, but the character is not even playable yet in real life. So it was a really strange feeling watching that character in action. The way that the character moved, the little peaks of personality and the graceful gestures and the stance, it all seemed to just make sense. It just felt right, if that makes any sense. I guess what I'm getting at is that I'm excited to play a character from a game that I'm not even really invested in like that, because of the personality that that character brings to the table. I really appreciate it, and I feel as though that amount of detail is going into every single character this time around. So even though I might not be a fan of the Metroid series, I'm definitely a fan of Dark Samus. I'm probably going to use that character a lot, and when I think about all of the people that actually like the original Samus character, or maybe even Zero Suit Samus, we're going to have some true rivalries. It's almost a storyline within a storyline, from a storyline that isn't even my own. It's not something I grew up with, it's not something I was very invested in. So I feel as though Nintendo, Sakurai, and his team with Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, they're really making me care about things that I wasn't too interested in before. So I guess Super Smash Bros. Is doing its job, and it's not even out yet. So that's going to do it for today. I want to talk about doing the impossible, so we'll discuss all that and more, and I'll see you next time. Later.